Hello, and welcome to Sleep with Stories, your bedtime story retreat. My name is Simon, and tonight I'll be your guide on a special journey, a gentle, sleepy retelling of the beloved classic, The Little Prince, one of the most translated books in the world. Together, we'll travel to distant planets and cover creativity in the most unexpected places and absorb one of life's deepest lessons. It is only with the heart that one can truly see. What is essential is invisible too. The eye. But before we begin our story, I invite you to take a moment to relax, finding comfort in the space you're in right now. Gently close your eyes and allow your body to sink into the mattress beneath you with your eyes softly shut. Take a deep breath in. For a few moments, bring your attention to the sensations in your body. Notice the points of contact between your body and the mattress. Feel the weight of your legs sinking into the soft bed, the cool smoothness of the sheets against your skin. Sense how the pillow cradles your head, offering a place to rest and renew. Feel the touch of the blankets, wrapping around you, welcoming you into this safe haven of comfort and peace. Now, check in with your body for any tension or heaviness you might be carrying. Perhaps there are aches or discomforts that surface today. If so, we'll take a few minutes to gently release any unease or strain. Start by taking a slow breath in while tensing your hands and arms. Clench your fists and tighten your arms as much as you can. Hold that tension for 1, 2, 3, 4. And now release it completely with a long, deep exhale. Feel the calming energy flow through your arms and hands as you let go of the built-up tension. Next, move to your torso. Tighten your stomach and chest, slowly breathing in as you do. Hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then let go with an exhale. Take another deep breath, noticing how soothing it feels to fill your lungs, and gently exhale. Now move down to your legs. With a slow breath in, tense all the muscles in your legs as firmly as you can. Hold the tension for 1, 2, 3, 4, and release it with a full exhale. Feel the warmth and relaxation traveling through your legs as any remaining tension melts away, and finally, bring your attention to your head and shoulders. As you inhale slowly, lift your shoulders toward your ears, clench your jaw, and tighten any muscles in your face that you can. Hold the breath and feel that pressure build for 1, 2, 3, 4, until you finally release it all. Feel a sense of clarity and fresh energy wash over your head, releasing any lingering weight you've been carrying. Know that at any point during our journey into the world of the Little Prince, you can return to this exercise to relieve any tension you feel. It's a simple practice you can use anytime you need to calm down and recenter. Now that we've taken some time to settle into the present moment, let's begin our story. Once upon a time, there was a gifted little boy, just 6 years old, who decided to become an artist. His very first drawing didn't show the sun or flowers or his parents. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. When he proudly showed it to the grown-ups around him, many congratulated him on his drawing of a hat. Puzzled by their inability to see the story he was telling with his art, he created drawing number 2 this time, a cross-section of the boa, with the elephant clearly visible inside, so even adults could understand, while other children were. Excited by his drawing, the adults he showed it to simply shook their heads. It was exhausting for children to always have to explain things to grown-ups. They encouraged the young boy to give up drawing and art altogether. Why not focus on geography, arithmetic, or grammar instead? They said. And so, instead of following the path of art, he turned his attention to becoming a pilot. At least then, he could fly high above the clouds and see the world from a completely new perspective. The one perspective he never gave up was his view of grown-ups. Although they claimed to care about important matters, these adults were simply too serious for their own good. To test this, he would show every adult he met his drawing number 1. And every single one of them would say without fail that it was a picture of a hat. That's how he knew they lacked true understanding, and that he couldn't talk to them about jungles, stars, or the curious and imaginative thoughts that filled his mind. Instead, he had to stick to practical topics like politics and neckties, loneliness, and a fateful flight. For a long time, the pilot felt alone in this world of grown-ups. But then, on one fateful day, everything changed. That day, he made a quiet decision to take a solo trip. He climbed into his small airplane and soared into the skies. Up high above the world, he often found a kind of peace that felt impossible to reach on the ground. He loved gliding far above the cotton-like clouds, feeling gravity melt away as he rose higher and higher into the heavens. He cherished the way the golden sun reflected on the tops of the clouds, making them glow and sparkle with a breathtaking orange light. He appreciated how small the world looked from above, and yet how magical. He could see wide rivers reduced to delicate blue and turquoise lines snaking through the landscape. He watched towering mountains become soft, rocky ridges emerging from the earth, painted with a mosaic of greens, browns, and beige tones. Taking in the whole view always stole his breath away. From the cliff-lined mountains, he could even spot the shimmering sea in the distance, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. But on that fateful day, the pilot was flying over a place perhaps even more extraordinary. He soared high above the Sahara Desert, one of the most remote, desolate, and solitary places in the world. And yet, from the sky, it was also one of the most beautiful. The desert sand displayed an astonishing variety of colors and shapes. It stretched smooth and untouched for miles, like an endless sea of calm. Suddenly, enormous dunes seemed to rise up to kiss the pale blue sky. There were trails in the sand, swirls and brilliant patterns that made it feel as though nature herself was using the desert as her canvas. The pilot loved every second of flying over the Sahara. It reminded him of the world's magic and wonder, but he never expected to see this wild and wondrous landscape up close and in person. Suddenly, his airplane began to rattle and groan in the air. It started losing altitude, and it quickly became clear his plane was going down. As calmly as possible, he gripped the controls and guided the aircraft down toward the sand. He watched the dunes draw closer and closer, rising up before him. The plane landed with a jolt, sending up giant clouds of sand into the shimmering air. It wasn't the smoothest landing, but he was relieved to realize he was unharmed. He hadn't been injured in the crash, however. The engine of his plane was broken. He stumbled out into the sand, hearing it crunch beneath his boots. It was immediately clear the plane wouldn't be flying again anytime soon. He was in quite a difficult situation. From the sky, he had seen that there were no people, no houses, no resources for miles in any direction. And now, here, he was with few supplies and no one to ask for help. The unexpected encounter and the drawing of the sheeper. Was there someone he could ask for help? It was while he was sketching quietly with a pencil and paper that he first realized he wasn't alone. A small, peculiar voice asked, "Will you draw me a sheep?" Startled, the pilot turned and saw a little person standing before him. The little prince was slender, with golden hair that shimmered in the light and eyes full of curiosity. At first, the pilot felt uneasy seeing such a young boy in the desert. He knew he'd have to feed the child, take care of him, and help him find his way home. But there was something very unusual about the boy. The little prince showed no trace of fear on his face. He didn't seem the least bit concerned about being lost in the desert. The pilot told the little prince that he didn't know how to draw a sheep, but that he could draw something else with a smile under the blazing desert sun. The pilot drew his drawing number 1 for the little prince. The little prince took the drawing in his tiny hands and exclaimed, "No, no. I don't want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. That's too dangerous and too big. I need a sheep." So the pilot drew sheep after sheep for the little prince. But each one was rejected. "That's not the sheep I'm looking for," the boy would say. At last, feeling a little frustrated, the pilot drew a simple box. He handed it to the little prince and said, "This box contains exactly the sheep you're looking for." The little prince lit up with joy, hugging the drawing. It was exactly what he had hoped for. He wondered aloud whether the sheep would have enough grass to eat inside the box. After all, the box was quite small, but the pilot wasn't so worried about the imaginary sheep inside the imaginary box. He tried to ask the little prince where he had come from, but the boy wasn't interested in answering questions. He only wanted to ask them. The little prince examined the airplane with the innocent wonder of a child, poking at its metal parts with a glint of amazement in his eyes. He asked the pilot what the airplane was for. "It allows me to fly through the sky," the pilot replied. A warm, comforted smile spread across the little prince's face. He was relieved to hear that the pilot, too, had come from the sky. He asked which planet the pilot came from, much to the pilot's surprise. And in return, the pilot asked the same question of the little prince, wondering if it might explain why such a curious boy was here in the desert. But strangely, the little prince didn't answer. Instead, he gazed at the drawing in his hands, smiling softly and thanking the pilot once again for drawing him such a wonderful sheep. "Do you want me to draw a post and a rope for the sheep so it doesn't get lost?" the pilot asked, but the little prince only laughed. "There's no way the sheep could get lost," he said. "My planet is so small." This was the pilot's first real clue about where the strange little boy had come from. After consulting a few star charts, he concluded that the boy must be from asteroid B612, a small asteroid discovered in 1909. But that was just the kind of detail that only mattered to adults. Because the pilot knew, adults only understand facts and numbers. They don't care about the true and meaningful qualities of things. They measure beauty based on age or cost. Everything else slips right past them. They don't see a sheep in a box on a tiny planet. They see a square drawn on a piece of paper, baking under the sun of the Sahara Desert. Revelations and baobabs. The days that followed turned out to be some of the most fascinating of the pilot's life. The little prince and the pilot spent all their time together working on the plane and walking through the endless, sun-baked sands. With every sunrise that woke them and every sunset they admired, they grew closer. And slowly, the pilot learned more and more about where this strange little boy had come from. On the third day of their meeting, the little prince explained why he wanted a sheep. He wanted the sheep to eat the baobab seedlings that sprouted on his planet. Baobabs are magnificent and enormous trees, with deep roots that twist through the earth. They are majestic, with towering branches and leafy crowns that cast wide shadows across the land. But there was a problem. The powerful roots of the baobabs could crack the prince's tiny planet into pieces. It was his responsibility to make sure that never happened. He explained that every planet has both good plants and bad ones, and it's important to remain watchful and care for the bad plants before they grow too big, before they cause trouble. The pilot couldn't help but admire how much wisdom the prince had gathered from something as simple and powerful as a baobab tree. As they spoke about the baobabs, the two of them sat in the sand, watching the sun lower itself toward the horizon. The little prince was mesmerized by the colors. The way the sunset painted the sky in a stunning mosaic of pinks, reds, oranges, and purples, how the colors danced across the desert dunes and brought the landscape to life. In a soft little voice, he told the pilot that on his planet, one could watch the sunset anytime, just by taking a few small steps. One day, he had watched 44 sunsets. Only then did the pilot truly realize just how impossibly small the little prince's planet must be. As the sun finally slipped beneath the edge of the world that day, the pilot found himself watching the little prince as he fell asleep. He looked so small in that vast, endless desert. The pilot couldn't imagine how someone with such a vivid imagination, someone who felt so deeply, could be so very alone. The importance of flowers and their thorns. The fifth day, the pilot knew he had to start making real progress. The airplanes still wouldn't fly, and their food and water supplies were running dangerously low. He spent most of the morning working on the engine, trying everything he could think of to get it running again. Meanwhile, the little prince wandered nearby, staring at the drawing of his sheep with growing concern. He asked the pilot, who was busy and frustrated, if sheep would eat both bushes and flowers on his planet. Sheep eat anything, the pilot replied quickly. The little prince's concern only deepened. Even flowers with thorns? He asked. Then, what's the point of the thorns if they don't protect the flowers? But the pilot couldn't think about flowers, or sheep, or distant planets, or sweet questions about the universe that begged for answers. All he could think about was survival. Frustrated by everything, he snapped at the little prince, telling him he was busy with important matters. The little prince clenched his tiny fists, hurt and angry. "Important matters?" he exclaimed. "You're acting just like a grown-up if someone loves a flower that only exists on one single planet among all the millions and millions of stars. That's enough to make them happy whenever they look up at the sky. They tell themselves, 'My flower is out there somewhere.' But if the sheep eats the flower then, for them, it's as if suddenly all the stars go dark, and you don't think that's important." The pilot stopped working on the plane. The boy's words washed over him like a great wave, and just moments later, the little prince began to sob. The pilot rushed to him and gently gathered the boy into his arms, holding him close. Yes, getting out of the desert was important, but the happiness of this strange, wonderful boy that was the most important thing of all. After all, in that moment, all they had in the world was each other and the stories they shared between them. "Your flower will be okay, I promise," the pilot whispered, soothing his small companion. "How about I draw a muzzle for the sheep while you tell me more about that beautiful flower of yours?" The story of the vain, rosy little prince smiled through his tears, brushing them away from his bright blue eyes. He sat down in the sand and looked up at the sky toward the universe, where somewhere his beloved flower still lived. One day, he explained, a new plant began to grow on his planet. At first, he feared it might be another kind of baobab, but as the days passed and the plant grew taller, he saw it was nothing like the others. It was delicate, graceful, and unlike anything he'd ever seen. The plant soon revealed itself to be a rose. In the inky blackness of space, she was a glowing beacon of color, a splash of red against the dark. Her beauty overwhelmed the little prince. He had never seen anything so lovely before, and she brought him so much joy. She told him she was the only flower of her kind in the whole universe, and that she was the most beautiful of all plants, and she was beautiful. But she was also vain. Day after day, she demanded his attention. He watered her so she'd stay fresh and vibrant. He placed a glass dome over her each night to keep her warm and safe. He built a screen to protect her from the wind that threatened her delicate petals, and even though he served her day after day, the prince loved her deeply. But then, one day, the little prince caught the rose in a lie. She told him the place she came from had no wind. But the prince had seen her grow from a tiny sprout on his very own planet. That small lie made the prince begin to doubt everything. Was her love real? Did she care for him as much as he cared for her? Or was everything just a trick to keep him close? The questions swirled in his heart and made him feel distant, lonely, even betrayed. So he made a decision. He had to leave his planet. In preparation, the little prince carefully cleaned out his 2 active volcanoes and the third one, now extinct, just in case. As he watered the rose one last time, he held back tears. He lifted the glass dome to place it gently over her, saying goodbye. The rose was silent for a long moment. Before quietly apologizing to the prince, she told him that she loved him and that there was no need to cover her anymore. She promised she would be fine without his care. She urged him to go and turned away so he wouldn't see the tears. Rolling down her petals, the interplanetary journey, the little prince did as she asked, with the help of a flock of wild birds. He took off into the universe, visiting 6 tiny asteroids along the way. On each one, he met grown-ups who were impossibly strange, grown-ups who taught him a lot about how the universe works. Or perhaps how it doesn't. On the first asteroid, he met a king who had no subjects, but still commanded enormous authority. The king wore a dazzling robe of fur and sat on a golden throne encrusted with jewels. He proudly declared himself ruler of the universe, claiming dominion over every star the little prince could see. But when the little prince asked the king to command a sunset, the king agreed, but said they'd have to wait until exactly 7:40. The little prince couldn't help noticing how the king had to consult a large almanac before choosing the time. Desperately, the king begged the little prince to stay and serve as minister of justice, a role the prince found pointless, since there was no one else on the asteroid to judge. So the prince moved on, perplexed by the king's strange behavior. On the second planet, he found a very vain man who only craved praise and admiration. He clung to the idea that he was the most admirable person on his lonely little world. The third planet was home to a drunkard who couldn't stop drinking because he was desperate to forget how ashamed he felt from drinking. The fourth planet belonged to a businessman. He hardly had a moment to spare and barely mumbled, "Good morning," to the prince. The man was deeply busy, counting and cataloging the stars in the sky. Why was he doing that? Well, to own them, of course. Owning them, he said, would make him rich. And if he were rich, he could buy even more stars. If any new ones were ever discovered, he had no time to talk. He was, as he said, dealing with matters of importance. The fifth asteroid was the smallest of all. There was only enough space for a single street lamp and a lamplighter. The lamplighter greeted the prince kindly and explained his duty: to light the lamp at night and extinguish it in the morning. His orders had once made perfect sense, but lately the planet had begun to spin faster and faster. Now, a single day on his planet lasted just 1 minute. The little prince watched in awe as the lamplighter lit the lamp with dazzling orange embers that filled the tiny planet with a warm, breathtaking glow. Then, just as the flame began to grow, the lamplighter would extinguish it, sending a plume of smoke spiraling up into the sky. The little prince watched this eternal dance for a long while. He praised the lamplighter for his deep sense of duty and purpose, and for the quiet beauty he brought into the world with his small flame. But when the prince gently suggested that the lamplighter walk in rhythm with the sunset so that he might rest, his words went unheard. The lamplighter simply continued his endless dance with the light, obediently following the original orders. The little prince felt sad to leave this gentle soul and the 1,440 potential sunsets that planet offered each day. But he knew there were other places yet to see. The sixth planet was vast, perhaps 10 times larger than the last. There, behind a massive desk, sat an elderly geographer who welcomed the little prince with cautious curiosity. He hoped, perhaps, that the young visitor was an explorer. The prince's eyes sparkled at the thought. He asked eagerly about the oceans and mountains that might adorn such a large planet, but to his surprise, the geographer knew nothing of them. You see, he wasn't an explorer himself. He never traveled, never saw the things he recorded. He simply waited for others to report their findings. Still, the geographer was intrigued by the little prince's own planet. So the prince told him about his 3 volcanoes, the baobabs, and his precious rose. "I'm not interested in roses," the geographer said dryly. "They are ephemeral. They disappear quickly. My rose is ephemeral." The prince whispered, "And she is all alone in the world, with only 4 thorns to protect herself." A sharp pang of regret passed through him, but soon he gathered his courage once more, and following the geographer's suggestion, he set off toward Earth. Perhaps the strangest planet of all, arrival on Earth, and the secret of the fox arrived in the desert. With no one in sight for miles and miles in every direction, he thought Earth might be uninhabited, a world much like his own. But before long, he encountered a yellow snake who claimed to have the power to return him home whenever he wished. The prince wasn't sure what to make of the offer. So he continued his search, wandering through the desert in search of people, in search of more. There, he came across a desert flower with only 3 petals. She said she had once seen a caravan, and told the prince there were very few people. On Earth, maybe 6 or 7, she guessed. They had no roots. They were carried by the wind, which made life incredibly difficult for them. The prince kept walking, searching the endless landscape for signs of life, for answers. One day, he followed a winding dirt road through the desert. As he walked, the crunch of the earth beneath his feet filled the silence. Then in the distance, a shimmer of red and green caught his eye. As he approached, the unmistakable scent of fresh flowers surrounded him. He stood before a vast rose garden, stretching as far as the eye could see. He had once believed his rose was unique, that no other flower like her existed in all the universe, and now he saw that it wasn't true. The little prince was devastated. He lay down in the soft grass of the garden and began to cry. As he wept, a small fox appeared, still shaken by the discovery that his beloved rose was not as unique as he had once believed. The prince asked the fox if she would play with him. "First, you must tame me," the fox replied gently. She explained that taming meant establishing ties. At that moment, they meant nothing to each other. But if the little prince tamed the fox, they would be connected. They would need one another. They would become unique and special in each other's eyes, perhaps even friends. The fox told him that if he tamed her, she would begin to look forward to his footsteps, instead of running away from them. The golden fields of wheat would no longer be just wheat, but something beautiful, for they would remind her of the golden hair of her dear friend. Over time, the little prince gently and patiently tamed the fox, and through this bond, he realized something important, that a certain flower, his flower, had tamed him. When the time came for the little prince to leave, the fox cried softly. Still, she thanked him for giving her a reason to gaze at the wheat fields with a heart full of joy. As the little prince walked toward the horizon, the fox called after him and asked him to visit the rose garden once more. There, he would finally understand why his rose on his little planet was so deeply, truly special. So he returned to the rose garden, just as the fox had asked, surrounded by petals and perfume. The little prince began to see clearly. All these roses might be equally beautiful, but none of them was his rose. His rose was the one he had watered, sheltered beneath a glass dome. protected from the wind, and listened to even when she was. Quiet or vain or proud, his rose was special because of the time he had given her, because of the bond they had formed, with this new understanding shining in his heart. The prince returned to say goodbye to the fox. She was proud of all he had learned. They sat together, watching the golden wheat sway in the wind. The fox offered one last, precious truth. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye. The time he had spent with his rose, and the love they had shared, was what made her truly unique. I hope you enjoyed this story, and that it brought you peace, comfort, and a restful night's sleep, please. Join me again tomorrow for another bedtime story. Until then, sweet dreams.